Spinning. There we go. So, follow up of yesterday's core dev call number 32. We could not find the time to discuss all issues. Let me just share the agenda for today here again. That has two remaining issues. One specifically probably best to start with is a mitigation process for Tobias to walk us through what that would look like on behalf of the security team. And then the second point that we couldn't get to yesterday is a discussion on Stimbus. Basically following up on the discuss posts that are there. I'll walk through like that process a little bit more in detail, but in a way understanding what is Stimbus, why should we be working on it, why now, what are the responsibilities or expectations of anyone who starts working on it, deliverables, how should this team work, and eventually also who should take on the work, who would be managing, leading that process, and who are the most likely contributors to call on. So yeah, with that in mind, how does this sound like for an agenda? Does anyone have any other things they would like to discuss? All right, no news, good news. Tobias, do you want to walk us through the mitigation process? And let me just share the doc here.
I will do. So take this with a grain of salt. I made a very sketchy sketch. I don't want to processify things too much here. It's just a couple of notes while Corey is on parental leave. So basically there's two directions I want to discuss briefly with you how we could handle and improve security. One idea is basically from every core contributor towards the security team. I would like to propose thinking of us as a team as a security as a service facility, which is probably done partially already. But basically I also want to inform you, okay, like whenever something is happening where you think security should have an eye on, tag either me or security internal or Rajiv. You can also like direct message us, obviously. So that's basically only to tell you, okay, Corey is not really available right now for anyone that has not noticed. Then basically this part is also meant to give you some idea of how we could perform threat modeling while you guys are writing specs or PRs. So I had a brief chat with Hester before the call, and I think especially like as an example, the admention issue that we discussed in yesterday's call was interesting because basically we reviewed it collaboratively. And yeah, I think at some point there were some security considerations discussed, even though there was actually no security issues identified beforehand. So as a rule of thumb, I think especially if you think a PR or an issue is perfectly fine, that could be some indication that you might still want to tag us, because usually when people think everything is fine, this is when stuff goes wrong. So punchline being, tag us more often also to get security out of the way, basically. You can use this as a catalyst for your own development process, so you can focus on the stuff that you actually want to produce. So yeah, again, punchline, tag us. Makes our lives a lot of easier, because we don't have to go through like everything that you guys produce, which is yeah, a lot. On the other hand, I kind of see this problem when it comes to threat modeling, writing up GitHub issues, which might end up being not read or not really being interacted with. So I think it makes a lot of sense if you also give the security team some feedback on, okay, is this stuff too generic for you? Is it actionable enough? Because in my head, there's this trade-off between stuff being too educative, too generic, not really interesting, and then again too specific, so only like someone that is very involved with the issue kind of gets the problem that is solved there. So yeah, I think in this case we kind of rely on your feedback to figure out, okay, what is the right distance and what is the right scope for yeah, threat modeling and security issues. Then the second direction is the bug bounty program mitigations that we kind of want to speed up a little. So as a first bullet point here, there's a time frame of 30 days for everything that we get reported. I think that's a pretty ambitious goal, but yeah, as a security and privacy our project, I think it makes a lot of sense for us to kind of aim high here and go for a timely resolution of any findings. I think the rest of the bug bounty related issues is known to you. So we have these issues and we kind of escalate them internally. But what's kind of new and what I want to try out, it's too bad that Vitaly is not here, but he was actually mitigating one of the reports, and I want to personally dedicate my kudos budget to people that contribute to mitigating security issues. Reasoning being security and privacy is one of the core values of the status project. So I think it makes sense if we have some sort of direct mechanism to incentivize people to work on that and give them more credibility than for your day-to-day issue. I hope this makes sense to you guys, but I think it's important that we have a differentiation between let's say a regular bug fix and something which is security relevant. Then the other thing I wanted to propose and ask is if we can parallelize testing for vulnerabilities together with the mitigation. So the idea here is that I think from testing and tests being in the CI, we can potentially also have some cross-project insights on vulnerabilities. So the issue is usually that if only a few people are involved in mitigating things, the same issue might be reintroduced either in the same project or in another project. And I think especially between React and desktop, there's a lot of shared exposure and vulnerability surface. So I think if we can get potentially Tatiana and Sergey to write some tests which reproduce vulnerabilities, then we could share these tests, or at least testing goals or the testing paths that we implement there, to kind of be safe when making changes to not reintroduce any bugs. So yeah, this was basically what I wanted to let you guys know. And yeah, I mean, it's a process sketch, so whatever comes out of it, let's see. Would definitely like to hear your thoughts on that, and otherwise let's see how this goes.
Awesome, thank you, Tobias. Any thoughts from those on the call? All right, that sounds good. Tobias, maybe to summarize for those who are only listening to the call on YouTube and might not be able to get direct access to the link of the process doc, what are the key takeaways that you want people in the different teams to know when it comes to dealing with security relevant fixes, testing or automated testing, and whenever they submit a PR?
To make it very brief, I mean, you get kudos whenever you fix a security vulnerability. So there's some sugar involved, definitely. The other thing is, if you think something is not security relevant, it probably is. So tag us if you think there is a security issues, but also tag us if you think everything is perfectly fine, so we can basically verify that. I think whenever there is a discussion around the security of a feature or a PR, that's a good thing, and then we're basically where we wanna be at. But in the moment when there is everything's good, this is usually when stuff goes wrong. So basically as a rule of thumb, tag us if you think everything is fine, and of course if you have whatever open question.
Cool. And in terms of tagging, I think what we discussed before was let's set up a similar process to manual QA required, so that you don't necessarily have to remember which individual to tag, but you add a label to ask for a security review.
Right. So I added some headers that you can use that will work in the notes.
Cool. Okay, great. Thank you. I don't think we actually had an established process of managing security along with product development. So that's a good step forwards. Moving to our next agenda item, Stimbus, working name, suggestions welcome. Does anyone feel inclined to give an introduction, or should I go ahead and kind of like brief on what it is that we want to talk about?
Yeah, I'll say if you could give a quick introduction. Andrea is going to be here in the moment, so I guess if we have a quick introduction, meanwhile, would be good.
Okay, quick introduction until Andre is here. Judith, please fill in if I'm missing anything.
Right.
Shared in advance different documentation. One, and let me share it here, is like early thoughts on why Stimbus, like why do we need it? And then there is a discuss post by Jared that also explains why we need it. That goes very much into Nimbus being one of the projects within the status network that we want to start unifying with the rest of projects in the status network, so that we can get a better alignment on how we collaborate and the interoperability of these products. Let me just find a link to that issue. A lot of discussion on Nimbus. There we go. So please review those if you haven't already. Oops, there we go. But yeah, what it comes down to, let me walk through the why of this. There are features in development for Nimbus and VAC that are like, especially for Nimbus, goes without saying, but also for VAC, are developed for Nimbus integration specifically. They're not being developed for Status Go. So if ever we want to make use of these features, we need to somehow integrate with Nimbus on the client side. That also means we would be able to experiment with features. Could be anything from messaging protocol to handling transactions, giving early confirmations. But in any case, experiments are something that we cannot do if we rely on, let's say, I believe it's Get that is also responsible for supporting the current Ethereum network. That makes them, not, they don't have an incentive to start experimenting and potentially screw things up for everyone, right? So integrating Nimbus will help us to start being a little bit more experimental with features. Then there's the idea of the status network features, also being able to use those on mail servers, which is in a way a separate project, can be implemented next to working on client integration. Another topic here is that bundling different features in Nimbus and VAC will allow for better network scaling. And eventually, network scaling will help us move away from Infura. Don't know like what time frame to be thinking of, but I know there's like an ongoing discussion of how do we handle pending transactions. Well, if we want to be able to do that, if Infura doesn't offer it, then we would need to set up our own sort of like broker network, incentivized routing network. While that might be something that can be done with Nimbus as well. Then there is the why now. The why now is like we could start with messaging as a simple use case. So this is more the like sort of the softening factor. It doesn't have to be everything all at once, but messaging is a relatively cut out case that we can start with. We could slowly introduce more complex scenarios that go more in the direction of transaction syncing. Let's see, starting now would, again, allow for including more advanced services later on, so we could control better rollout. Whereas if we were to start like 4 or 5 months from now, we would still need to transition at some point in time. So there's more of an issue of if we start later, we're only delaying. It'll need to happen eventually if we want to become an independent network. Let's see what else is here. I think most of those we've touched on. Missing anything, Yui, in the why and why now? Or anything you can better clarify?
Well, long term, the future of Ethereum is at 2.0 anyway. So that's something we need to move at some point anyway. And if we move it sooner rather than when it's already too late, it's better. And I think the Nimbus team, they mentioned things like there's value on the table because there are things that get developed, but then they sit there for months while it needs to be implemented in status quo. So we're hoping to reduce that cycle, so users get that value quicker when things are researched and implemented in Nimbus.
Got it. Thank you. And then there's.
I wanted to ask. I would like to understand the relationship between this issue that we have with Infura and Stimbus a little bit better. Maybe is there some shared planning or some interconnection between the two things? Hey Vitali, I wanted to give you kudos for the security issue. Glad that you joined.
Good timing.
Thanks for leaving now then.
Kudos. Applause for the man. Yeah, so my question is there like an intersection of these two issues that we want to integrate Nimbus and that we want to move away from Infura?
Yeah, so on that, actually, first of all, is there anyone from Nimbus in here?
No, I don't think so.
So take what I say with a grain of salt, because I don't want to speak for them too much. But on that, although that's not what we're being asked to do first, I think that we're being asked to do first the Waku stuff. At least that's what Oscar mentioned was the priority. But in terms of Infura, there's the light clients and other approaches to to get the data that. And this way, we will not need to rely on Infura. There's the question, though, on, and that's why I wanted to ask someone from Nimbus, like how much is that actually developed? How much is ready to use? What is the actual bandwidth that it uses? And how practical overall it is, and what are the different approaches at 1.0 and 2.0? But in an ideal world, if the light clients work as well as it's supposed to work, then we would not need Infura. We could the app could just have a light client and get all the data it needs through that process.
Does that answer your question?
This assumes that.
Sorry?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I will think a little bit more about it.
As a side note, can interject? A lot of these technical reasons that I think there are very valuable technical reasons for doing these, but a lot of these technical reasons are just one guy's opinion, and especially I make an example when they say that features are implemented faster in NIM than in status quo. That's based on Waku, the experience with Waku, where the Waku implementation that currently we have in NIM is not complete. It lacks of mail servers rate limiting, and it was implemented by a developer who shortly after left the company and basically dropped the ball on implementing it. So I think there are good technical arguments and there are also very bad ones. This is a bad one because you can't compare speed of development between two developers that have different priorities and so on and so forth in one use case. But also because obviously I'm involved in this, and so obviously I've been working with Status Quo, and I've been working with NIM, something that other people have not been working with. So I can tell you that the speed of development is, I'm not sure whether, it's difficult to compare as everything. They're two different programming languages. Other than that, but that's why I push for having people that are technically involved in this before giving opinion, because clearly there's a lack of understanding in some places.
Yeah, Andre, just to clarify, in this case, I was just like relaying what was said in that early Steam Bust meeting.
I know. I know I had a discussion with people involved with this. No, the words. I know it's not maybe your opinion.
Because there was questions asked, for example, what happens if we don't implement Nimbus or don't implement Nimbus, or what are we losing, what are we gaining? And that was some of the stuff said. So I was kind of relaying that just for more context, so everyone has the same context.
Yeah, I understand. And I think some points, and technical points, like for example, 2.0, that's a very strong point. But I think there needs to be a moderation between like something that is clearly an opinion and something that is a technical point, which is factual, like 2.0.
What would you say, Andrea, would be valid arguments for implementing Nimbus now? Because I'd like to make sure we have those clear and we can discuss whether we agree on those arguments.
Organizational points are all valid, the ones that Gerard made. I think those are probably the most valuable, right? It's nicer to have, like synergy between all the teams and so on and so forth. If 2.0 is good, the rest I think is questionable. Like experimenting with Nimbus and NIM and as it is good, it's identical. Like if you want to fork a project, then you can just fork it. There's no, there's a bit of more culture shock. It's just like we own Nimbus, and that makes sense, to push for our own implementation from a company strategy. But I would be a bit more careful with saying that, you can't experiment. It's just anyone's going to have an opinion about this, and I think it's very difficult to get away with it. So I would just focus on those main points.
And to recap, that's synergy between teams. And there was
ETH 2.0. That's why if you're in ETH 2.0,
okay, check.
Because if you're a replacement, we're already thinking about getting one in Status Quo, so it's not something that cannot be done. As a matter of fact, it can be done much easier because obviously Status Quo is already there. As Nimbus, that integrating it is proven to be very difficult because vendors worked on it already.
Got it. So removing or reliance on Infura can theoretically also be done without integrating Nimbus.
Yes, that's not to say that is a good idea. I mean, because obviously, there are valid values to integrate Nimbus, but it's not like the main point. It's just something that I wouldn't push for.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on this, on what would be valid arguments for implementing Nimbus now?
I wasn't clear for me what you said about the add 2.0, because for me that's a valid argument, at least long-term thinking.
I'm saying it's a valid argument. I'm agreeing with you. I think this is one of the strongest arguments for Nimbus.
All right.
And just to dig into that, that means we would otherwise not have at 2.0 features. Or we would not be able to use it.
No, but you can also integrate, there's going to be a status, a Go client for, I don't know, I'm not really familiar with development, but I think there's going to be a Go client for that. Just again, it would be a bit silly for us to use a Go client when we have an ETH2 client in-house. So, but it's possible. Everything is possible. Whether it's convenient is different.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hi, Hester. This is Rajiv here. Maybe I'm the only one who's missing the context here, but I would throw this in anyway. So when we're talking about Nimbus here, are we referring to Nimbus 2.0, which the team is already working on, or are we also referring to other NIM implementations of, let's say, Waku and ETH 1.0 and others, which I'm not sure what the status is. Because otherwise, I mean, Nimbus is really the 2.0, beacon validator, all the stuff that we're already working on.
My understanding, and it, like, for sure, everyone jump in. I'm way out of my depth here. This, to me, is about not Nimbus 2.0, but most importantly, NIM Waku, as new Waku features are being developed in NIM, as well as other Nimbus ETH1 features. Nimbus 2.0, in my mind, is something that we would then have an easier time integrating afterwards. But what we're looking at for the coming half year would be NIM Waku and Nimbus for ETH 1.0. Is that right?
Okay.
Any commentary?
Yeah, that was my assumption as well.
Oh, hey everyone. I kind of missed this one on. Yeah, so Nimbus is like everything ETH and everything research and everything blockchain and lower level and so on. It's really just a name for the whole project. Beacon Chain and ETH 2.0 is like one piece of that, and then I guess Waku is another one. And so on. Now, matter of ink and calling Waku, and then Nimbus is the ETH 1.0 client, and NBC is the ETH 2.0 client. It's a terminology.
Okay, got it. Thanks. That helps.
So now that you're here, Jessica, so there was a question asked about reducing our reliance on the Ethereum, and if there's a Nimbus is related to that in a way, in the sense that it could reduce that reliance. So in terms of light clients, in the context of at 1.0 and 2.0, what is like the state of that? And in particular, we're taking into considerations things like bandwidth in considerations in mobile.
Yeah, so let's see now. In terms of completeness, Nimbus is not ready yet, like the ETH1, right? So as a consequence of that, the light client stuff is not ready either. The idea, however, is that by starting integrating the Nimbus code now, and by starting to use it in the app, we learn more precisely about what API needs to be supported and implement those with priority, right? So one pretty exciting development in the ETH1 space is BeamSync, right? Some clients like Nevermind, we implement this BeamSync that originally was made for Lightning clients, I think, yeah, Trinity. And it's simply a way of syncing ETH1 state on the fly instead of going through all the blocks and states and so on. And that's the kind of feature that we would prioritize if we saw a concrete way of using it in the app, for example. And this would also mean that we can tailor this feature to our use case by basing it on these real world use cases. But that's not ready. However, it's being worked on, and in order to have it ready, or in order to be in a position where we can use it when it will be ready, which will not be too far away from now, the idea with starting this in this project right now is that we take care of a lot of other integration issues that have to be solved before we can start using these more efficient sync protocols anyway. And in terms of readiness, Waku is the most ready one. Like, that's where some of the research has been happening. That's like where things have been prototyped. and later implemented, and it would be convenient and easy to focus that research and that development in NIMWAKU, on NIMWAKU only, right?
Right.
In terms of E2, light plans don't exist yet, not even as a specification. It's going to take a year or two before that happens. In terms of E1, there are proposals, and what we'd like to do is like implement one of the proposals and go with that flow. That would be like a step on the journey to become less dependent on external services.
Just to throw in a comment that was made earlier, Jacek, there is also an argument to be made for we can remove reliance on external services by other means without integrating with Nimbus. What would be the benefit of integrating specifically Nimbus to remove reliance on other services?
I mean, depends on how you look at it, right? Depends on what those other services are. We could go with Vitnode, right? And I think we even tried that at some point too. But I mean, the general argument for going with Nimbus is that we want to develop original solutions to these problems because the existing solutions are not adapted to our use case to a sufficient degree. And if we replace, I mean, if the question was, are we going to replace, I don't know, guest with Clarity? I'm just using Clarity as an example here, right? But if we were to replace like one external vendor with another, we would still be in the position where it's difficult to influence the direction of where that product is going. We might be able to negotiate some of these things, and if our interests are aligned with theirs, we might be able to influence where those other vendor products get developed. But I think the whole idea of building our own client is because we have a use case which is not sufficiently served by other vendors, and we believe that by giving it focus, it's of sufficient importance to the organization that we want to develop for ourselves. And at that point, like, we ask ourselves the question, like, where do we go? And Nimbus is just a natural answer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to try and summarize the arguments I've heard so far on, like, just to close off the agenda item on why should we be implementing Nimbus. The two strongest arguments I heard was, synergy between teams, like just synergy as an organization by using each other's infrastructure and using each other's resources. And then the second was preparing for ETH 2.0 by starting with integrating Nimbus now. So that's like preparing for what's going to happen 2 years down the line. And then there's, like, I would want to add C of NIMWAKU currently only being developed in NIM. So we need to figure out a way to integrate with them regardless. Are there any other arguments to start implementing Nimbus now that I missed there?
I would like to add that we have some, I would like to add that we have some inherent demand for the case of Infura, which I think is a very cool and motivating thing to work on, actually. So if we have like some project internal demand and we have some project internal supply, it's just a question of matchmaking to make it work.
Okay. And that matchmaking would be potentially done by a production team or by the desktop team, or
to be specified.
Okay. Cool. Any concerns on like this question on why should we be implementing Nimbus integrating? Okay, so the next aspect I think we should be discussing is whoever works on it what would their responsibilities be? What are the expectations of the implementation? So it kind of goes together, responsibilities and deliverables. Maybe we start with deliverables. What should come out of whoever starts implementing it in the coming, let's say, 4 months?
All right. So on this, just to add also like other context, so we can discuss this and see if everyone agrees. Jess actually suggested that we start by doing a sort of like a shim, and you might call this several things. I think some people call it service layer, proxy, whatever. But the idea is that you just have a very simple NIM library that all it does is that it mirrors the exact API that that lib status is doing, and then it just redirects everything to status go and back. And this way we could start, sooner rather than later, integrating with the desktop and the mobile clients without any loss or break of functionality. And with this, we could then, do certain changes, and it's very clear what the changes are, and it's easier to test them and not to break things. Instead of becoming this like huge project that, at a certain date we have to do all this gigantic transition.
So I'm hearing like expectation of like coming out of using a shim layer is to start soon, lower impact on existing clients because they can continue using status go. Anything else?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, first I would like to hear what people think, if anything, on this. If they think it's a good idea, or they think that's a bad idea for, I don't know, if there's some strong objections due to something we didn't think about to this, or things to consider.
I actually quite like that idea. Because it lets us, if we do it the other way around, it lets us immediately like bind things to NIM as well. I mean, as far as React is concerned anyways, it lets us bind things to NIM and start phasing or choking the Golang path slowly.
There's one thing to consider though. I mean, I think I like the gradual approach. I think it's worth it. One thing to consider is that the other way around allows you more granularity. So if you do as Pedro was doing, so integrating NIM into status go. The reason being is that, take an endpoint like send chat message, right? If you replace that with NIM, then anything that leaves, anything that leaves under the endpoint needs to be implemented before we can swap to NIM, right?
Right.
So that's that might be an issue because there's a lot of stuff that means that you need to, before you can actually integrate that endpoint, you need PFS to be implemented, all the protocol stuff, and so on and so forth. So you're not really, and then you have other dependencies because that depends on Whisper and status go. So you might end up having to basically do a big bang if you go that approach. The other way around, if you integrate NIM with status go, then you can sort of replace Whisper, right? You start from the bottom. Here, you're really starting from the top. And so I would be a bit more careful. I don't know whether it's a good approach or a bad approach because it's difficult to say, but instinctively, the other way around is better. It's definitely better. The problem is the complication because we've seen Pedro's work. That's complex. It's not easy, right? So those are the complications.
I wonder if we could also do from both sides and meet in the middle in a way.
This is not the France to UK tunnel. We have to we have to figure this out.
The France to UK tunnel, right? Well, I can see Andreas' point that it does seem to be easier in the status go for some things, like especially because it needs things to be signed and so on. So there's a lot of components in there. On the other hand, there's things like say database and stuff like that could be done on the NIM side more easily, and the API is replaced. So I mean, that's why I suggest that could be that approach to meet in the middle.
So, like, one thing to why this was suggested to begin with was basically that if we ever want to be pure NIM, this is like where we're heading anyway. Now, there is a little bit of nuance to the shim layer. One thing is that when we create a shim layer in, say, NIM or really in Go as well, typically done in 2 layers. One is a shim layer for native NIM applications, and then on top of that, what's typically built is a C interface, just like the Go code now exposes a C interface into the Go world, which is a little bit more simple than what you would have if you were using Go natively. So the shim layer is really two shim layers, and that's one little point. Like there's a C shim layer, which exposes a pure C interface that the Clojure code combined into, and then there exists also a NIM shim layer, which hides the difference between status Go and status NIM, really, which one of these two gets called. What's interesting is that status Go, in order to implement status NIM, we can selectively choose bits and pieces from status Go, export them from status Go, and import them into status NIM as well, thanks to this shim layer. So I don't think it's that big of a difference which way you go, bottom up, top down in this case. You can still pick out parts of status Go and use them in NIM. That's like not an issue. Importing Go in NIM is just as easy as exporting NIM to Go. There's no really. I don't feel this is a big deal really, whichever way is chosen. However, if we believe in the fact that we're going to be using a majority of Nimbus code at some point in the future, and I think that we will end up there not too far from now, because Waku is already significantly diverging from Whisper, and there is more divergence coming. Likewise with research developments in Lippy2P itself. It's just easier to frame the problem in NIM terms and then implement it in or fetch implementations from Go than the other way around, I think.
I just one thing to think about. So I mean, that's a difficult question. I don't disagree with you. I mean, it might be that you're right. So I'm just thinking practically speaking. So status layer will call NIM, right? NIM will call some status Go for example, PFS, right? Because we need to do that. And then status Go needs to call NIM again for Whisper, right? So that would be if you want to keep things as they are. Otherwise, you would have to significantly restructure the status Go, right? Because at the moment, essentially, if you want to go live with NIM, you would, with Waku, written in NIM, you would have to do these kind of things.
No, I wouldn't go there really. I would never call the NIM Whisper from.
Yeah, so that would require some restructuring of the Go code essentially. So
I suspect that the Go code would have to expose a few things. So let's use an example here so that it's concrete, right? So let's say I want to send a message, right? Right now, I don't remember how much of the status chat message format, the thing that used to be translated now is protobuf. That stuff is in Go now, right?
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, the user wants to send the message, right? And that's some kind of text string, and we pass that to status Go. What status Go does is it encodes it as protobuf, and then it encrypts it using all the PFS machinery, and then it sends it to Whisper, right? If I was approaching this problem with the status nim shim layer driving it, the way I would probably do is that I would intercept the raw message, and in version 1, I would just call status go and have it do everything. Then in version 2, I would maybe ask status go to perform, the translation to protobuf and the encryption steps, and give me, the payload. And I would send it to Whisper myself from, if I was status nim, right? So Go would never really call into the status nim Whisper. There would never be that.
Yeah, no, of course, what I was pointing out is not that it cannot be done. I mean, that's very obvious how to do it. I'm just saying that, like when considering the workload, you need to also take into consideration that status code will need to be changed. That's what I'm saying. Basically, like these, things don't really, like if you do it the other way around, you touch the list amount of status code, and if you do the other way around, you need to take into consideration the fact that you will have to change status code a bit more. That's what I'm saying.
Andrea, from what I understand, you're saying basically that parts like PFS and maybe the protocol part is currently in the status go code too intertwined with the Whisper or the Waco code, so there's no clear API cut between those. And what Jacek is proposing, you could not currently do because of that.
No, that's not quite what I'm saying. Like, I'm not making a qualitative judgment on the status go code. There's a separation of layer, but it's a stack, right? If you like what Jacek is talking about is basically like taking the last layer of that stack and putting it on top. So I have two separate stacks. So you go all the way down to the encryption layer, and then instead of stacking, going to the next layer, which is the transport layer, Whisper, you bring it back up and use a different implementation, because we're not going to plug it in directly as it is now. At the moment, it's just a stack, right? And so like each layer passes to the other layer. So in this case, you need to be it's a bit different, right? It's a bit like more system based.
Yeah, right. I get it. Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, okay.
Is it a requirement to limit required work on status go?
I mean, I was pointing out that I just think that we need to be aware of the work. Not, I don't have any opinions on the matter.
Okay. So, I mean, this is obviously a very technical discussion, and I'm not sure who exactly needs to be involved. But it sounds to me like there is a proposal to use a shim layer. It has pros and cons that also have implications for resources or how much work is required to work on each layer by respective teams. So some of the work might land more on the core team, whereas if the implications for status go are minimal, it could be an independent team. What I would suggest is that we move to who would work on this, setting as a first deliverable. And I think we already discussed that there would be a list of stakeholders, and those stakeholders need to sign off on whatever work the team does. So I would set as a first deliverable that there needs to be an implementation plan that takes into account that the work can start soon, that there is low impact on existing clients, so takes into account at least what work would be required on status go, that any implementation can happen gradual, so we avoid like a big bang where risk is high. That proposal would then need to be approved by whoever we appoint as stakeholder. Does that sound workable? Because it seems to me like this. Yeah, we can go in circles in what's the best implementation approach, and I think at some point some people will need to start the work to understand what the actual implications will be. And I know Pedro already, and Adam actually, already did a lot of work in that respect. But of like the people joining now, yeah, I think some people will need to actually start the work and write a proposal of how they will implement it. And I'd like to understand who those people would be. Does that sound, reason? Yeah, Yuri, go ahead.
Well, I mean, in terms of those people, I mean, I volunteer to participate with this as well with the desktop team. Who from the desktop team is exactly? I cannot right away say. We kind of usually embark to work on different things at the same time, so it will probably be rotation of people depending on the particular iteration.
Okay, and then I think we already also established it would need representatives from core to make sure whatever's written would be suitable for a mobile client.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on who that would be, and like, are they available to?
Yeah, so Vitaly has expressed interest in kind of joining the work group, and I agree it's a good fit. So Vitaly would be joining as one of the people that actually does the work, writes the code. I think for most of like the mobile concerns, he can like represent quote unquote our interests, on the lack of a better expression. And yeah, my only concern, but this has already been brought up with Yuri, and we kind of agreed on this, is that as long as we have a solid way to work where we spec things and we make sure that all the code that ends up there has tests, and we kind of take under consideration what core and mobile need as well. I don't care who leads the team. I don't care like what the work structure is.
Okay.
Yeah, so I second that. So that, I mean, basically means that we have in core some code, I guess, that could be used as a library, but we'll not use that. Instead, we'll it's better just to start over, like do specs, make sure that perfectly as interactive as possible, but expect to make sure that both the requirements of mobile and desktop are taken into account, namely performance and bandwidth and all that is very important on the mobile side. We write tests for it and then actually implement. That might involve some copy pasting in a way of the code that's in desktop, but not necessarily, depending on what kind of API we come up with.
Mm-hmm. So is it like as an expectation from, in this case, the desktop team plus Vitaly, that there would be an initial spec? And I understand for each feature you would need to have more detailed specs, but an initial, let's say, list of user stories and likely direction, as well as a proposal of what the architecture would look like as first deliverables. And that architecture being like shim layer, yes or no?
Would the first deliverable be the shim, or that's still open?
I think a proposal on whether that solution would be used, yes or no. More details on whether like that solution is appropriate, what the risks would be, and how those would be managed.
It would certainly be great if we understood like the problem fully before we made a decision for it as well. And if we have to do some exploratory work, then so be it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're gonna pay like a penalty up front, but you're more than likely gonna make up for it in the long run by knowing what the unknown unknowns are, or figuring out what the unknown unknowns are.
That's something that can be time boxed. So it's like a time boxed exploring, with the outcome being an initial spec and a proposal for the architecture, which may or may not be like using a shim layer.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I mean, you know, I want Samuel to be involved in this as well, because he'll bring in some, you know, the Go knowledge, and he can help inform decisions on that end. I know Andrea will not resist to keep his hands off of it, so he'll probably be jumping in and out as you know, as something catches his eye, sort of thing. So we can agree on the team now, but it's not going to be like set in stone. And like Yuri says, it's also like kind of healthy to rotate people in and out as they kind of get burnt out from doing that work. So I think it's more important to kind of agree on the method, agree that, you know, we're going to explore things and do them the right way. And then the rest, you know, the rest is kind of implementation details that really, like, I don't particularly care about too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it helps to have and I'm not like, I don't want to get caught up on dates or like exact deliverables, but I do want to make sure that Andrea, you worked on Go and NIM. Andrea, you're saying Samuel should be involved because he's working in Go and specifying a lot now. I do want to make sure that we don't leave it to chance that people can review the work. So how can we do that?
Time boxing it is good. I think people exploring both options and making sure that we time box some people's time right now to do some of the exploration work is important. You know, like you said, we don't want to leave it to chance, but you know, most importantly, we want to make sure that they feel they're not dropping any balls by doing the work that needs to be done right now. So if we actually prioritize it, I think it'll work really well.
Okay.
So you know, giving Samuel like at least a couple of days a week where he can, giving Samuel a couple of days a week where he can actually help explore the side of things and provide the Go sort of provide the Go context and help that they'll need is going to be good.
Okay.
So on this, like, I propose like we can this week create like a proposal for the shim, so it can be like discussed and analyzed, sort of like a initial draft spec for that, and then next week we could start like an iteration with that, so it'd be time boxed and with some goals for that. I don't know. I can do a meeting for that. I'll just have to see everyone's, you know, time zones and schedules to see what day fits best.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
So this week, discuss and analyze what a architecture proposal or initial spec could look like. Share that publicly, and once everyone agrees on that proposal, start iterating. And that could be discussed in like a weekly or a bi-weekly call that you'll schedule, Yui.
Yeah. I'll schedule it. It's probably going to be at this time, I guess, because it seems to be the most compatible with everyone, time zone wise.
Sounds good to me.
Great. Anyone, any last thoughts or concerns to share?
I do have a concern that I'd like to share. That concern is that you all look too good today.
That's a good variation to have. And it includes people on YouTube, right?
Huh?
It includes people on YouTube.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the people. Oh, yeah. Okay. Hi, people on YouTube. Sorry. Not sorry.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I hope if anyone took notes, please share them with me. I'll try and draft at least some takeaways and share those out with you.
Yeah. Well, I just want to add that YouTube people are very welcome to contribute to SteamBus if they want to. It's open to everyone.
Good point. Good point. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, morning. Talk soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.